Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone, and welcome to the America's Founding Series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. I'm your host, Nick Giordano. I'm glad you could join me. Make sure that you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com, and share this episode with other great patriots out there, because today, our national conversation about America's origins, they often feel trapped, and you have two different people out there. On one side, we hear the triumphant story of 1776, a nation born in liberty through revolution, forged by ideals of freedom and self-governance, the idea of an American identity and changing the course of history for the greater good. On the other side, you have a stark narrative of 1619, a nation born in sin, the crucible of slavery, an evil nation whose prosperity and peoples is forever tainted by systemic oppression. The latter fails to capture the rich, complex, and vibrant history of the United States, the more inspiring tapestry of our past. And it does a disservice. It does a disservice to everything America has accomplished over the course of our short history. It's a disservice to everyone who paid the ultimate sacrifice in the birth of this nation and in constant defense of this nation. It also does a disservice to everyone who contributed to the great American experiment. And today, we delve into the story of an extraordinary American whose life is a profound testament to the power and complexity of our nation's founding, to our nation's ideals. When we look at the late 18th century, history often emphasizes the great sweeping forces, the conflicts, the debates, the famous figures. But the true spirit of America, the real engine of liberty, it resides in the forgotten stories of the people who embody the American principles, long before they were actually codified and written down. And a patriot of mixed race, born free in colonial New England, who not only risked his life for the Revolution, but embodied the very best of American civic duty for decades afterwards. Most people have never heard of Wentworth Cheswell. His story is not one of a token exception. It's an example of what is possible in the United States. It's an example that even in an imperfect society, for those who embrace self-reliance and civic responsibility, there is no limit to what you could achieve in the United States. And Cheswell's story isn't just about the past. It's a mirror for our present day. Too many Americans, they've abandoned their civic responsibilities. They mistakenly believe that government, particularly the federal government, should handle everything, that it's the end-all be-all. But Cheswell's life, it offers a powerful counter-narrative. It shows us what happens when ordinary citizens rise up to do extraordinary things, when ordinary citizens step up, take responsibility, and actively participate in self-governance, because that's what this is all about. It's when we step back that liberty itself begins to shrink. So we need to journey back to the 18th century, get back to our roots, the American ideals, and New Hampshire is a great place to start. Wentworth Cheswell was born in 1746 in Newmarket, New Hampshire. This was a bustling town resting along the Lamprey River, flowing into the Great Bay. And his birth year places him firmly within the colonial era. This is a subject often painted with broad strokes of limited opportunity, especially for Black people. But Cheswell's story begins with an extraordinary advantage. He was privileged. He had freedom. And he had the stability that came along with it. Hope Still was his father. Hope Still was a free Black man who was not only a skilled tradesman, but he was a successful landowner. In the colonial era, land ownership was the very definition of status, stability, civic participation. It conveyed economic independence and often the right to vote. Hope Still Cheswell was a man of enterprise and industry, and his success secured his family's position in society. It provided a unique foundation for his son, because this foundation allowed for another remarkable opportunity for his son, an education. Wentworth went to Dummer Academy, which is now known as the Governor's Academy in South Byfield, Massachusetts. This was an elite institution, one of the very first preparatory schools in America, and it was known for its rigorous classical curriculum. For a young man of mixed race to receive such an education in the mid-18th century, it was not just rare, it was almost unheard of. And he would have studied Latin, Greek, the great philosophers, Western civilization, mathematics, rhetoric, the very same subjects that prepared many of the sons of the colonial elite for leadership. Armed with this education, Cheswell wasn't going to let people down. He returned to Newmarket, and he became a teacher. He imparted his knowledge to the next generation. And like his father, he also became a substantial landowner. He built a beautiful home, established himself firmly within the community, and continued the legacy of civic responsibility not only to his family, but within that community. And this early life was marked by freedom, education, social standing. It prepared him for a very comfortable existence, but it also prepared him for a life of extraordinary service, both in war and the enduring peace that would follow. The quiet prosperity of Newmarket and all of the American colonies, it was about to be shattered. The year 1775, the powder keg that existed in the colonies exploded as tensions with British hit the breaking point. And on the night of April 18th, the alarms began to ring, and it was time to mobilize for war. Now, we know the name Paul Revere and his legendary midnight ride. If you listen to this program, you would also know the name of William Dawes, because Paul Revere wasn't the only one that went on a midnight ride. William Dawes, his legendary ride was even more fraught than Revere's. And I encourage you to check out that episode. They galloped through the Massachusetts countryside, warning that the regulars are coming and the British were marching on Concord. But the message of liberty and the urgent need to defend our colonies, it wasn't confined to just them. It wasn't confined to just one specific route. It was a shared duty, and it echoed across the colonial landscape. That very same night, as Revere and Dawes headed west, Wentworth Cheswell joined the New Hampshire Committee of Safety. He mounted his own horse, rode north from Boston, carrying the urgent news and warnings to rally his own community. He wanted to rally the people of New Hampshire along the coastline. His ride, while it is less celebrated, it was just as vital as Revere's and Dawes. And he traversed the darkness, alerting towns, coordinating defenses. He wanted to ensure that New Hampshire is going to be ready to answer the call for liberty. This wasn't a singular heroic act for Cheswell. It demonstrated a fundamental truth of the revolution, that the defense of liberty was a responsibility of everyone, and it must be embraced by ordinary citizens. His commitment to liberty and independence, it deepened. It didn't just end with this ride. He went into military service. He joined the local militia. He served under General Horatio Gates at the Battle of Saratoga in 1777. Saratoga was one of the most decisive turning points of the American Revolution. It was a stunning American victory, and this is ultimately going to convince France to formally ally itself with our new nation. Cheswell, as I said before, wasn't a token patriot. He believed in the cause. He wasn't a bystander. He was a full participant. He was an integral part of both the alarm system that mobilized the patriot forces and the military defense that secured our freedom. What makes it even more amazing is that he comes from a life of privilege. He put his life on the line for a cause greater than himself. And we constantly look at the Declaration of Independence, and the last line, I always bring it up. It always sticks out to me, where we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And while many link that line to the signers of the Declaration, understand, it goes well beyond them. This was lived out by countless Americans like Wentworth Cheswell. This forms the basis for the American identity, and his actions during the Revolution speaks volumes. Here was a man, born free, educated, respected. He had everything to lose, and yet he chose to risk it all for the ideals of self-governance and liberty. He risked his life on horseback, his fortune as a landowner, his honor as a respected member of his community, all for the survival of an idea that was still fragile. It was untested. Nobody knew if this American experiment is really going to survive. And so in Cheswell's choices, we see the true meaning of that pledge. Liberty is not secured by paper and proclamations alone. They're secured by citizens willing to put everything on the line, everything on the line. to defend it. But Cheswell's most enduring legacy wasn't forged on the battlefield. It was built brick by brick, document by document, election by election, in the post-revolutionary world, this new America. And I'm going to explain that when we get back from a quick commercial break. So everyone hang tight. We'll be right back. Are you ready to move easily and independently without pain and stiffness holding you back? Do you want to look in the mirror and see a hydrated glow instead of more fine lines and wrinkles? Well, discover Native Path Collagen, made with only type 1 and 3 collagen fibers. These are the two most important types that make up 90% of the collagen found in your cartilage, bones, skin, hair, nails, and gut. They provide maximum benefits. And Native Path Collagen is a single ingredient formula with no fillers, additives, or artificial sweeteners. Plus, it's third-party tested for heavy metals, ensuring purity and safety. Completely flavorless, Native Path Collagen can be added to anything: coffee, smoothies, oatmeal, you name it. It doesn't clump, it absorbs fast thanks to its peptide formula. And the best part, Native Path offers amazing bundle deals at a fraction of the price of other brands. With over 4 million jars sold, 1 million happy customers, 8,000 5-star reviews, and a 365-day no-risk guarantee, Native Path is a brand you could trust. They offer an 800 number for any questions you may have, and then you'll speak to a real person who's there to help. Visit getnativepath.com/PAS and start your transformation today. That's getnativepath.com/PAS. Welcome back to the America's Founding Series, part of the P.A.S. Report podcast. Now, if you find in the content of this episode interesting, share it with 3 to 4 great patriots who are going to appreciate learning what America is truly about, understanding our past and connecting it to the present. And don't forget to leave the P.A.S. Report podcast a 5-star rating. Take 30 seconds to write a good review, particularly on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or any other podcast platform that allows it. Now, let's get back to Wentworth Cheswell, because his story demonstrates his bravery and courage, not just by alerting colonists that the British are coming, the British are advancing, but actively fighting the British on the battlefield. However, that's just one aspect to Cheswell. If we really want to understand what makes him a great American, it's the principles he lived by following the war. Because after the war, Cheswell returned home and he began to live out the founder's vision of Republican self-governance in its most pure form. He held virtually every local office imaginable. In fact, he was first elected to public office as town constable all the way back in 1768, a full 8 years before the Declaration of Independence. And this makes him the first African-American elected to public office in American history. And yet most people, including Black Americans, never even heard his name. How ridiculous is that? What a failure of our educational institutions that this person, Wentworth Cheswell, goes virtually unknown. And after the revolution, his civic career really blossomed. He served as town clerk for 49 consecutive years. At the time, and it still is, a position of immense responsibility, documents everything from births and deaths, property transactions, town meeting minutes. He was a selectman, an auditor, a moderator, and even a justice of the peace, a judge of probate. Think about that span of time, nearly a half century of continuous, active, hands-on governance, all at the local level. It wasn't about ambition. It wasn't about fame or power. It wasn't about the luxuries that came with these positions, because at the time there weren't that many luxuries. What it was about was fulfilling a sacred civic duty. Cheswell's life proves that the revolution was not just about soldiers fighting for independence. It was about citizens building and maintaining a functioning republic, not a democracy, a republic from the ground up. It's the embodiment of Republican self-governance. Ordinary men and women taking direct responsibility for their community, making decisions, enforcing laws, solving problems, rather than outsource everything to some distant, anonymous central government. It's the idea, the beauty of federalism. A republic if you could keep it. And his story also shatters the simplistic narratives that we've been inundated with when it comes to America's founding. This shatters the idea that America was founded on slavery. Did slavery exist? Yes. But Wentworth and his life stand as an irrefutable testament that a free Black family could not only thrive, but serve and lead in colonial New England. His existence doesn't erase the stain of slavery on our record. We have to look at the totality of the American experience, the good and the bad. But with Wentworth's story, it profoundly complicates the picture that the 1619 ideologues try and push. His story shows that the ideals of liberty and self-governance were powerful enough to inspire and be embraced across lines of race and class, even in an imperfect society. I mean, think about the amount of African Americans, Black people that I covered on the America's Founding series. And the reason that I bring them up is to show that this idea of liberty and freedom was important to everyone. It didn't matter what race you were. It didn't matter what gender you were. And it brings us to our lesson for today. Civic responsibility. It's not optional. It's a duty. It is the cornerstone of liberty. We live in an age where far too many Americans have disengaged from politics, where they surrender responsibility and decision-making to the ever-growing list of government entities. And when people take a step back, government is going to fill that void, particularly the federal government. They're going to step in, and that's exactly what's been happening. The central government usurps enormous power and authority because so many have no idea what federalism is or what the limits of federal power should be. They mistakenly have been indoctrinated to believe that the federal government is responsible for anything and everything. Far too many Americans have disengaged from the essential work Cheswell championed. And when we decide that local issues like schools, roads, budgets are someone else's problems, when we step back, government comes in, they fill that void, and liberty shrinks. We should not be disengaging from the political process. We should be jumping full on head in. Because when the federal government steps in for the vacuum that's been created, the government grows more distant. It grows more centralized. Liberty is under constant threat. And the principles of old republicanism and federalism, which understood that power should reside closest to the people, have been completely forgotten. We've seen local and state governments become more reliant on federal funding, more reliant on federal dictates and mandates, which erodes their autonomy. But Cheswell life reminds us that freedom depends on citizens actively governing themselves at all levels, but especially the local levels. I mean, let's look at it. New York City is going to be an interesting test case. You have socialist candidate Mamdani. Now, for the last 4 election cycles for the mayoral race in New York City, only 23 to 26% of voting eligible people turn out in the elections. That's disgraceful. It shows that we have failed in our civic duty. And that's why showing up, paying attention, serving on committees, voting in local elections, holding officials accountable, that's why it's so important. It's what makes this idea of self-governance possible. We don't need government-run grocery stores. We don't need the government to take more stake in our lives. We are fully capable of governing ourselves. And the best way to honor forgotten patriots like Wentworth Cheswell isn't just to remember the name, but to follow their example, live out the ideals of liberty by taking responsibility for our communities, refuse to let government substitute for the active participation of the people, because ultimately, the strength of our republic and the endurance of liberty depends not on distant leaders, but on everyday actions of engaged citizens, just like Wentworth Cheswell, just like so many of those ordinary Americans I bring up on the America's Founding series, to bring to life their stories and why these people are still relevant today. The profound impact they had, not just on the 13 colonies, but the world. Now, if you found the content of this episode informative, please leave the P.A.S. Report podcast a 5-star rating, take 30 seconds to write a good review, and share this episode with your family and friends. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week to discover more great patriots that contributed to America's founding.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at pasreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.